involvement in the UFO cover-up and the government's involvement in the technology, and the fact, and this I can state as a fact, the fact that the government was implanting people, you know, with biochips and all kinds of different, you know, tags or some kind of electronic devices, and then they were trying to run a propaganda campaign to blame it on the aliens. I'm sure you've heard all of that, right?
Yeah, that would go along with, I guess, also with abductions and such.
Yeah. Now, I'm not saying, see, I don't want to make a definitive statement,
right,
Keith, without getting too personal here about my own experiences, because I've had a lot of bizarre experiences myself, very bizarre. So I don't want to make a definitive statement, but I can tell you that I know for a fact that the government does abductions, that they are involved in genetic engineering, which is another big propaganda campaign that they are trying to blame on extraterrestrials. I know you know about that.
Mm-hmm.
And my point being is that the government is completely, in my opinion, from everything that I have seen in all these years, just very, very corrupt and very secretive. And the idea, the principle of human rights, the principle of God-given rights, which we talked about, which is the dearest subject to my heart. We talked about that on the last show. These principles on which the Constitution is based and which we're supposed to have, you know, these rights respected, they don't.
No.
They don't. And that comes out in the idea or the fact of these abductions and everything else. But to get back to the idea of the media that we were speaking about before.
All right, tell you what, before you go there, and I want you to, but here I go again.
Okay.
I just want to throw this out. You know, tell you the truth, the way I look at it, whatever that is out there, I know, just whoever it is, whatever it is, cannot be good for us, and that's all I care about.
Well, yeah, you know, I'll tell you something. There was a time, since we're on the subject, I guess we can just continue for a few minutes. That's no problem.
See how bad I am? I do this all the time.
It's okay, Keith. I like to be spontaneous. But I can remember in the old days, and we're going back quite a long time, you know, over 20 years here now, but I used to attend some of these UFO conferences and things like that. And, you know, I was there at the time, not only as an investigator, but I was there on a press pass usually, because I did have my own, you know, TV show and radio show at that time, and sponsored by CIA. I mean, I'm not denying that, but in any case, I would go to these conferences that they would have, you know, UFO type conferences, and there would be all kinds of people there that were basically infiltrators, you know, infiltrators from the government. And when I first even started to put out any information, you know, about these issues, that's when I first realized what was really going on in terms of the so-called alternative media. I mean, I'm talking about how bad it was, you know,
yep.
How the disinformation was spread and all that. There were just quite a few people out there that were, you know, they're there for the government. They're putting out, they're there to gather information, and there's an element here of COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, you know, that we talked about last time, where they're trying to extract information about people's experiences, whether it's UFO sightings or abductions or anything like that. And, you know, then they try to steer how that information will be published, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of the reasons that you can't really believe anything. You can't believe anything because they're always putting a spin on it, you know? They're just always putting a spin.
By the way, I wanted to say something to you, too, to close the book more or less in upstate New York, because I think this is widely forgotten about, but should be remembered. And what I found very interesting is people talk about the report from Iron Mountain, and Iron Mountain is right across the river.
I've been there.
You've been to that facility?
I've been to Iron Mountain, oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you how long ago that was?
It was a long time ago, Keith, but, you know, yeah, they've got these, especially in the mountains.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that I found really interesting is that they do have a lot of underground facilities. And they have one at Pine Bush, by the way. I don't know if you knew that. But I actually went there with an investigator. He was a private investigator who I actually hired in the beginning just to check for telephone taps and things, and he did find them. We found military signals, and then they started to come after him, you know, because he was associated with me. But we got a lot of evidence, you know, which was photographs and everything else of some very bizarre activities. And a lot of them have underground bases because, as you probably know, there's caverns and there's networks underneath the mountains. That's where they usually are found.
All right. Now, this is going to be a real big wow. Mm-hmm. But there's been a guest on the show who was with U.S. Search and Rescue that responded to 9/11. A gentleman, and his name is Sergeant Matthew Tartaglia, who lives in southeast Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. Now, he's been on the show a number of times. He's been on a lot of shows, but off mic, we spoke about some things, and he said something to me that just raised the short hairs on the back of my neck, and that is, I'll tell you why it gets real specific, but let me state the general. I spent a lot of time up in the Catskills and the Ramapos, and one of the things that we were talking about, and we never really followed up on, was whether or not he seemed to indicate that he knew there was some underground linkage or transportation, if you would, between facilities in the Northeast.
Yeah, there is.
Okay, and all right. Now let me just get to the one that really bugged me, and I've never checked it out. But he knew I lived in Bergen County once upon a time.
That's New Jersey,
right? The most northeast county in the state. Mm-hmm.
And it's right across the bridge.
Sure.
Right? Okay, go ahead.
But he flipped out an address as to where one portal was. And I won't mention the number. I don't, only because you know I cannot support this, but there is only one building in this stretch on Midland Avenue in Paramus, which is a stone's throw from Route 17 and a sub-barracks of the New Jersey State Troopers. And it's a building I remember very well with black smoke glass. And he named the address, and I said, I know that place. I mean, it's kind of like there and obvious, but at the same time, you don't see it, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
And when he said that, that's when I got the chills. And then we started talking about, now we know that there's connections down in West Virginia and Virginia with regard to the government. But then I started wondering, and here's where I'll go back to you, and that is, do we have a network, and especially facilitated by the mountains, because they are so indestructible, even in this day and age?
Yeah. Well, Keith, you know something? I think I mentioned real briefly last time we spoke on the air about the fact that I was heavily involved in the paranormal sector. You know, I'm very heavily involved, and they've got, I mean, it's very bizarre. So, again, it goes to a credibility issue. You can't really prove a lot of these things. And so I've tended to stay away from that. I've spoken about it occasionally on radio shows and stuff. But, yeah, there's a huge underground network. They've got those bored tunnels. I'm sure you've heard of those, right?
Yes, the boring machines.
Boring machine tunnels, yeah. And God only knows, I mean, what everything that's going on there. I probably know only a fraction of it. And also, in my case, because it's so traumatic, you know, you can just imagine the kind of trauma associated with even knowing about something like that. I think I have blocked a lot of this out of my memory. You know, the people that were running these black projects, I mean, these are major black operations that most people, you know, maybe they hear something about it, but they don't really get much detail. But one of the things that they do is